YouTube. We are live on YouTube. We should be live on IG. It's like split screen on IG. So we're live on IG too. That's cool. Yeah, YouTube's live, IG is live. Let's get Twitter live. How's everybody doing? Philip, how you doing, man? Long time no see. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. This is Jalali Rahimi from OSIS, and I've got my co-host here. And well, you know what? He's more of the host. I'll be the co-host today. Justin Francisco, CMO of OSIS. I'm going to put you on spotlight, Justin. Today is another episode of OSIS University. This is episode 3. We're calling it Beyond Bitcoin. Last episode, we talked about Bitcoin itself and the origin story of the entire space. This episode, we're going to go beyond, and I'll let Justin take it away from here.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for joining up once again. Always a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm very excited to dive in for episode 3. So like Jalal said, last episode, we covered Bitcoin, its creation, some of the context around why it was created and why it's needed. And just to kind of summarize what we chatted about last week, basically the financial institutions of the world around 2008 were using strategies that weren't exactly sustainable. They made financial decisions which resulted in a large crash and a huge loss of funds for the everyday person. And then the government came in and they reacted by bailing these institutions out in order to prevent a larger economic collapse. And, and you can make arguments one way or another about whether that was the right thing to do or not, but ultimately this indicated to the public that the main priority of the government is to keep the 1% wealthy, no matter what they do. So then we have a person or group who is anonymous who stepped up and created Bitcoin. This is Satoshi Nakamoto. And what this person or group did was they created Bitcoin to be a trustless currency so that regular people could take their financial assets into their own hands and be free from any further government interference or corruption, anything like that. So today we're going to take it a step further. We're going to go beyond Bitcoin and talk about blockchain technologies as they've evolved since Bitcoin's creations. We're going to dive deeper into the broader crypto industry and basically aim to understand how these innovations work and why they're important. So first of all, I think what's important is understanding what even is a blockchain, the main source of power, the main source of technological interest for these cryptocurrencies. And we did discuss this a little last week, but basically a blockchain is a decentralized ledger, okay? And this is a term that I want to define for you right now. Basically think of a ledger as just a list of information similar to an Excel file. That's all it really is. Transactions are recorded in blocks, which are linked in a chain. So basically think that the blocks are pages of transactions and the chain is what links them together by using a technique called cryptography. And cryptography is basically the method of protecting information. Oh yeah, look at this fantastic little pop-up here. Exactly, so this is all a ledger really is, right? It's a simple, basic list of transactions from one person to another in amounts, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page about where the financials are going. But yes, this is powered by cryptography, and it's basically a method of protecting information by transforming it into a coded format that can only be read by someone who has the key to unlock it. So that main purpose is to keep data private, ensure it hasn't been tampered with, and to verify the identity of the people communicating. This is essential for keeping online communications and transactions safe without a middleman. So that's what powers the blockchain. But how does it really work? So every participant in the network has a copy of the ledger. Transactions are verified by consensus mechanisms. Okay, another good term here, consensus, is the collaboration of majority of people in the network and the agreement of majority of people in the network. So 51% of people need to agree, and that's what allows transactions to be verified.
So kind of
Consensus
like
mechanisms.
voting for a president. If the majority agree, that president gets voted in, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Or if you want to decide with your friends, hey, what kind of toppings do we want on this pizza? Majority of the people need to agree, otherwise you're not going to get any pizza. And so once verified, transactions are added to a block and appended also to the chain of all transactions. So think of it this way. A transaction is put into this page, this line on the Excel sheet, and then once a certain number of transactions are in there, a new page is opened up, and nobody can go back in time and change anything that happened in the past. So these three key features that are important to understand for blockchains and what makes them special is immutability. So that means data cannot be altered once it's on the blockchain. Transparency. That means everybody can see all the transactions. It's an open network. It's an open page. And security, powered by cryptography. And this is the principle that secures the network. And people have often wondered, like, can blockchains be hacked? And I'll walk you through this idea, this concept, using Bitcoin as an example. So a potential hacking method for like Bitcoin specifically or any real blockchain is called a 51% attack. And in order to execute this on Bitcoin, the cost would be $4.7 billion in hardware and $6.2 million for electricity if you're operating out of the United States. That's the costs today. And as the network continues to mature, these costs would only go up because the hash rate of Bitcoin, the number of computing power, number of computers that power the network continues to rise over time. But today, those are the costs. And if that were to be tried, first of all, the network would spot the unusual activity very quickly, and the community of miners would unite against the attacker. And furthermore, if someone was trying to do this, why would they be trying to do it? They'd be doing it so that they can access Bitcoin that's not theirs. And if they were to do this, it would tank the price. So why would they even try? You know what I mean? Like it's like trying to steal gold that's going to evaporate once you steal it. Like it costs so much money for what purpose? It really doesn't make any sense. But that's to imply that they could even really succeed in this, which they couldn't, because if they tried, there's many methods that could be done to prevent this sort of attack, such as a hard fork, and that would be the creation of a new kind of like fork off of the blockchain to ignore the hacker's changes.
So like a new copy of the spreadsheet that has all the transaction history.
Exactly. Like let's say, I don't know, the hack started to be noticed at 2 o'clock today. And so what would happen is the miners and the nodes would come together in agreement and say, okay, here's where the hack started. We're going to go to this point in time and start off of a new chain. Thus, the hack is nullified. So all of that money would be essentially wasted and it wouldn't even be successful. So
So it wouldn't that kind of be like if you deleted or you messed up some stuff in a file you were working on and then you just restored it to a previous version? Or the same thing
100%.
with your computer, where if you I don't know, crashed your computer and then you restored it to like a previous backup
Yep,
and
absolutely.
it's fine again, right? And it's the same concept here. So if someone tried
Yeah.
to hack, well, good luck because we have a previous copy that we can all collectively just go to. So your hack is
Yes.
nullified.
And by going back in time, like that wouldn't really do anything other than potentially undo some transactions within the last 10 minutes. So I mean, that's the whole potential risk really is that the last 10 minutes of transactions are no longer valid. And for most confirmation mechanisms, they require at least 3 blocks of transactions. So ultimately, it'd be so much time, effort, and money for literally no possible outcome for these hackers. Like it's essentially impossible to hack the blockchain. And and if it were really possible, you'd think someone would have tried and potentially succeeded, but there's been nothing like that happened.
Interesting.
So
So
that's really sort of like the foundation of blockchain and that sort of thing, and the fact that it's very secure. But now I want to kind of explore the evolution further from Bitcoin. So as you know, after Bitcoin, many new currencies, cryptocurrencies emerged. The first of which was Ethereum, and that introduced smart contracts. Okay, another term for us to know here. Smart contracts are just self-executing contracts with the terms directly in code. So it's a contract between one person and another, or potentially a group of people, where the terms are all laid out very clearly. The contract can be changed after it's launched, and it self-executes when certain terms are met. So to use an example that we sort of touched upon last week, let's say I wanted to send Jalal 100 apples and he was going to pay me $100. We would both send our assets to this contract. and then the assets would be divided between us. And if I sent in my apples and he didn't send in his money, he wouldn't be getting the apples, and I wouldn't be getting the money. We both have to be sending in our end of the deal in order to make this contract execute.
So it's almost like a smart contract replaces a middle party,
Mhm.
like a trusted middle party, with the use of code. Like we can automate this trusted middle party and take away the middleman and replace it with code that
Yes.
makes sure that the conditions are met. So it executes itself when the conditions are met. And
Yes.
this is a big thing because if we always have a middle party that we have to trust in the middle every time we do business, it makes things a lot more expensive because you have to have a person and that person has to be paid. And it makes things a lot more difficult when you're doing international business. With the internet growing to where it's growing, becoming like a global thing where we are interacting with people across the whole world and trying to do business across the whole world. We we can't always find a middleman that speaks both of our languages, that understands both of our needs and the nature of our business. When we both understand each other and we understand what we want to do in our deal, why don't we use something that we don't even have to trust, that we can build ourselves? So it's almost like an automatic middleman, but without the human aspect, so there's no human error.
Yes. Exactly, exactly. And you know what? To make an even simpler example, there's a sort of system like a smart contract that I'm sure everybody here has interacted with before, and that's a vending machine. I'm sure everybody here has used a vending machine, right? So
Great example.
insert money, and then the machine checks the amount if it's correct, and if it is, it dispenses the item. That's exactly how a smart contract works.
Beautiful, because you don't have to go to the guy who's selling you don't have to interact with the person if you don't need to. And you can interact with a vending machine anywhere in the world and you understand what you're gonna get. And
Exactly. You don't even need to speak
yeah,
the language, right? Like you can look and maybe, you might need to convert a currency to your local currency to understand how much it costs, but that's the extent of it.
beautiful. That's a really, really good example though. I like that a lot. Smart contracts are like vending machines. You don't need to trust the guy in the middle.
Mm.
Just know that it's gonna work. You're gonna get your your chips. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, essentially, Ethereum created smart contracts, and that's basically what enabled Web3 to exist. So, essentially, what is Web3 anyway? It's the decentralized web. It's like the evolution of the internet. Where Web2, so like the standard internet that we're all very familiar with, think like Facebook or Netflix or something like that. Those are all very centralized services. They're very controlled by big tech. Whereas Web3 actually aims for decentralization, meaning giving users control over their own data, empowering the individual far more, and cutting out middlemen. And a lot of the same principles behind smart contracts apply to the very concept of decentralization itself. It enables, less expensive interactions between people all over the globe. There's a couple of key components with Web3 that I want to kind of dive into, and these are dApps. So these are apps running on a blockchain, not controlled by a single entity. Smart contract would count as a dApp. It's just a little more complicated. The smart contracts that power the dApps are really the foundation. And there's an interesting thing that kind of got, I guess, invented recently, maybe like last cycle, but these are called DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. And these are organizations that are governed by code and consensus. So it's like a more perfect version of democracy almost. And then actually recently, OSIS coined a new term, a DSO. And so it's similar to a DAO, but actually with a greater focus on the empowerment of the individual within the community. A couple of examples. Oh, Jalal, do you want to hop in there?
I wanted to ask you about this graphic right here. When people look at Web3, like what does this mean? What is this transition that we're looking at here? Why is it even called Web3 in relation to these other two things? If we look at it like the internet.
Sure. Well, I mean, just looking at this graphic here, so Web 1.0 was very simple, like directories and like very simple, like HTML sort of things. I'm not sure if like the age of the average person in our audience here, but I was just old enough to be interacting with like Web 1.0. I think you could think of like dial-up and like way back, right? And then Web 2 was sort of like the evolution of that with like e-commerce and things like that getting invented. Things like video streaming and that sort of thing. Like greater transfers of data and more complicated interactions on the web. And then Web 3 is like a whole evolution of this whole system, right? Web 1 to Web 2, sort of a natural progression. Web 3 is like a whole new like layer of the internet, essentially. And that basically decentralizes everything and enables everyone to interact with it with far less interaction from these like middlemen. That'd be my take on this graphic.
Aaron said, "I'm 39. Web 1 was painful."
No doubt. And we're still in the early stages of Web 3 right now, and there may still be some pain points, as there was with Web 2 getting invented as well. But I think this natural evolution of the whole ecosystem is really interesting and fantastic, and really just marks another step in the direction of like the whole Earth kind of becoming more integrated, markets being able to exist across borders, people being able to communicate with each other across borders, and really just like the global mind becoming a lot more integrated.
So
That's
wait, what are some examples of Web 1 websites that you have experienced or that you've heard of people using?
Wow. Web 1 websites would be simply like imagine like a really boiled down version of Wikipedia. It's like literally like just a page with text on it. And it's like, here's a phone number for this university. That's what the internet originally started as, really. It was like a directory for libraries for universities. That's all it really was. And it was like, here's some information on like how to get in touch with a library, maybe an email address, something very, very simple stuff.
So it's like it was a faster way to look up like the phone number of your professor, and that's or
Basically.
it
Yeah,
was just basic information on a page. That's it.
it was like Yellow Pages 2.0. That's essentially what it was.
Faster yellow pages. Actually, that's how Elon Musk got into the whole like internet world, or how he made his money initially was he built something that helped newspapers bring their information into the web, like
Hmm.
bring the newspapers into the web.
Oh, I didn't know that. And on that point right there, what's interesting is so many of these companies that we're familiar with today, think Amazon or Netflix or Uber, actually had websites like really early on in the internet. Like I saw the examples of their first versions of these websites, and like, wow, I'm surprised. They've been around for a long time, and it took a long time for them to reach the highs that they've reached now, and like the market penetration that they have reached now. But yeah, I think next interesting idea to kind of dive into is why is this stuff even needed, right? Like I know we talked about some of the issues with the financial system and the sort of natural evolution of Web 2 and Web 1 into Web 2 and Web 2 into Web 3. And I mean, really, in summary, I mean, centralized entities often misuse their data and monopolies of big tech companies often control most online activity, and people just don't want this world anymore. They want a more free world, and basically the will of the people is what's driving this evolution forward. Web3 addresses the issues of the past world through enhanced security, through decentralization. So there's no single point of failure. It's harder for hackers, and it's safer for your data as well, because these hackers can't just access the centralized database. They'd have to break the blockchain, which we previously discussed is not really possible. And Web3 also gives users far more control over their personal data. And it reduces the power of these large industries and entities to take your data and use it for their own gain. I mean, ultimately, in summary, I would just say what I said before. It's basically the will of the every person to drive this industry forward, drive this technological evolution forward. That's exactly why Web3 is important and is coming into being. It's the will of the individual. And that's going to be a trend continuing to go forward, the empowerment of the individual.
I see we
And
have a comment. What Juan is asking, what will happen to Web 2 once Web 3 is adopted in mass? Will the middle entities die off eventually?
well, I'd like to explore what happened to Web 1 when Web 2 was adopted. Web 1 just simply became Web 2. Those pages of phone numbers on university websites evolved to the point where now these are fully featured websites where, yes, that information is still there, but now far more information is there. And I think as Web 3 continues to be created and fully mature, it's going to be the same sort of thing. Web 2 is not going to like go away. Like, I don't know if Netflix will stop existing per se, but it's just going to be like a smooth transition into greater capacity for Web3 and greater capability. That'd be my prediction.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you made, and a good question too, Juan. A lot of people, uh, uh, in I would say, a lot of people assume that it's a separate thing, but a lot of people don't realize that actually Web3 is just the evolution of the regular internet that we use. Like it's just the next software update. You know, when you go to the store and you see that the iPhone 15 is out and it has a new camera and it has new features and it has 5G internet, that's the exact same thing that's happening here. Like Bitcoin and blockchain and all of these things is it's just a natural progression and software update to the internet that we're experiencing. And the internet that we know now, which a lot of people like because it's so integrated in our lives, people are like, oh, it's it feels like it's been around forever, but really the
Mm,
internet has been around for like less than 30 years. Like in consumer use, Web 2 has been around for less than like what? Well, let's just say 30 years. Web 2, it's been 30 years. Our parents didn't even like see this for most of their lives until the later half of their lives, the last generation. So Web 2 or the internet is still young. It's still young. It hasn't touched every part of our lives just yet. And
true.
it will. It's
And even
getting there.
even the internet itself hasn't touched every corner of the globe yet. I mean, this is something that's being worked on from various companies, but I mean, to name one, Starlink is working on that. They're trying to get connectivity to the whole globe, so even the whole world isn't even on the internet yet.
Exactly, exactly. And the natural progression of the internet is going from this, where it's centralized, human mediated, and rent seeking. Rent seeking is an interesting word. But right now you can imagine it like um what's a good example of something that needs humans to run it, but no longer needs humans to run it?
I mean, historically, right? Like the number one example right now, banks, right? Like you needed, like my grandfather, for example, he to this day would still go to the bank to talk to a teller to withdraw money. And that just, you simply don't need that anymore, right? Like you can go to an AVM now and you can
Machinery.
put your, yeah, you can go to a computer. Or, I mean, when's the last time I even took out cash? I can't even remember. Like, so it just
uh,
happens on the phone now. You don't even need a person.
Aaron actually gave two really good examples. One is machinery, the other one is AutoCAD. So machinery, great example. Now it's automated. We have factories that are automated. Before it was like you need a person to watch over it to do stuff. Um, Fuel systems on vehicles, a really good point, Aaron. Web 2 is like that right now. As fancy and as amazing and as beautiful as it looks, websites are like the machinery of the past, which are there are people running it and they need people to mediate it and take care of it. And you don't really see it. It's like wizards behind the curtain, but it's happening. And there are certain limitations to that. Okay. Just like in the machinery, there are certain limitations, there are certain imperfections, inaccuracies, and some level of control and oversight. And in the context of like our use and expression on the internet, in some places there's even censorship because like example, Twitter has been really big, or X now it's called, has been really big on this, where they're like, okay, everybody else censors you, we don't, because we believe in free speech. Well, hey, every platform that is in Web 2 has the right to do that. You're in their house, you're at their factory, they're going to use these tools that they give you according to their own rules. And that's just the way that it is. You go into someone else's house and they say, hey, take your shoes off before you get in here. You can't be mad about having to take your shoes off. Okay. That's the reality with Web 2.
And I
Now,
think, to add on to that example as well, it's like imagine you went into somebody's house and then they said, okay, take off your shoes. And you did. Okay. And then you walk in, they're like, actually put your shoes back on. You're like, oh, okay. You put them back on. They're like, now take off your shirt. And you're like, wait, what? The rules keep changing. What's going on here? That's exactly how things go in Web 2. You know, it's like everything's always changing. Whereas in Web 3, I find often is the case. They release a smart contract, they define how a platform functions. That's how it is.
yes, it's has way less human mediation and oversight. It's all like imagine the rules like the Constitution of the United States. It's like these are the rules, guys. Everyone's gonna collectively follow them, and
Yes.
it's an agreement. And
And
if you,
that's
yeah,
And that's not to say that there can't be flexibility in Web3. The only thing is like, for example, if I was using X and they changed the rules, okay, then oh no, I just have to adapt to that rule change. On Web3, if they wanted to change the rules, they'd have to create a new system, a new platform where those are the new rules, and then the users would have to decide if they want to accept that. And I think that's a far better thing. It gives people something to actually count on and rely on when they're building on a platform.
Yes, and there's some level of like public and general people's uh participation in the decision making. Usually in Web3, there's some level of like community and group decision making. It's not just like a small number of people making a decision for everyone. It's like everyone making a decision for each other, for like together. A lot of the time it's a vote too. Like the DAO, decentralized autonomous organization that Justin mentioned earlier. It's like a new structure that people use, companies and Web3 projects and websites use, where it's like a group vote on new features, on new changes, on new rule changes, for example. Uh, it is democratic inherently.
Yes, absolutely. And there's actually many real world applications and use cases for Web3. We've talked mainly about financial services and things like that. That comes around in the form of DeFi. Something like OSIS Exchange would be a great example of a DeFi system, some place where someone can come and exchange one currency for another. That would be functioning as a bank, essentially. That exists currently as DeFi on the blockchain. Um, there's supply chain management. Companies want to use the blockchain to ensure transparency and traceability. Actually, currently, right now, IBM, their food system is using blockchain to reduce fraud, improve efficiency, and enable customers to actually track where their food has come from literally the farm to the factory to their front door. And that's a crazy example of how blockchain is being used in the real world. And another one actually is digital identity. So people are able to go now on the blockchain and create identities that are persistent, and they have full control over those on the blockchain.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Oh, you know what else? A key one I forgot as well is NFTs. I mean, that's a huge one. This is a huge new technology that's being produced on Web3. I don't know if everyone was around during last cycle, but if anyone here knows Beeple, he created NFTs and he sold like $69 million worth of NFTs. These are like art pieces that are verifiable on the blockchain. It's like you can own the Mona Lisa and you could have it a digital copy, and that could be something you can literally say you have ownership rights to versus something like a JPEG. You don't have any ownership rights over a JPEG. And even though what you are owning on an NFT may be a JPEG in some cases, you have the digital signature that verifies that this is an original piece that you own. Anyone else could come along and take that JPEG, sure, but they don't have the ownership rights associated with that.
Right.
Yeah, and there's a lot of criticisms and challenges that people have discussed around Web3. There's a big issue of like, oh, people always talking about scalability or how, current blockchains might struggle with high transaction volumes. But there's many things that are being worked on right now. For example, sharding, which is splitting the blockchain into smaller parts. There's many layer twos being created right now. And there's so many solutions being coming around to address this. I mean, it's still not a super mature industry, Web3, like we discussed before. I mean, the internet itself is only 30 years old, so there's still many challenges to be addressed in Web3. It's not a perfect system yet, but I think it opens the door for so many more interesting possibilities.
Absolutely. Now, I want to actually, Aaron, if you're still here, feel free to ask questions and drop questions in here. I love your engagement. Aaron Cashflow, he's in our Instagram, I believe. He's been doing great. So we'll leave that open.
Totally. And like towards the end of the call as well, like anyone just keep sending stuff to the chat. I'd love to have like a little question period too. Like anything from last episode that wasn't clear, anything from this episode, just general questions, like send them in. I'd love to help answer them, which you'll all.
Okay, so let's take a step back from the technical side of things and let's talk about like real world use cases of what the next phase of the internet looks like. Because we talked about how Web3 is just the evolution. It's just software update. Well, now that we're getting the software update, what new things can people do?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so that was some of the things I was chatting about, whether that's supply chain management or digital identity, the whole concept of DeFi itself, getting bankers out of the picture, really. Even things like NFTs, as I was mentioning as well. All kinds of new things that are happening that essentially take the physical world and push it into the digital world. And in fact, a huge trend that's coming up is tokenization. I mean, wow, that's exactly what we're working on. That's going to be this huge wave of basically digitizing the physical world and enabling far more things to be put on the blockchain. Imagine like you wanted to take your house and put it on the blockchain. You would use tokenization for that. You could split your house, fractionalize it, and allow way more people access into the market and increase liquidity and investors in your house or whatever it is. Even if you wanted to tokenize yourself, you could do that too. You could tokenize yourself as an artist, and people could invest in you as if you were a stock almost on the stock market.
Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper into that. This reality, when you talk about tokenization, when you talk about digitization, uh, I know tokenization is a technical term that most people have never heard, but I believe that most people have experienced the digitization of like our everyday lives. You mentioned banking before, where at one point in time you had to go to your banker and you had to sit with them and in order to make a transaction. And now you have mobile banking. You have cashless. You're able to live cashless and just use your card, or not even your card anymore. You can use your phone in order to tap and make these frictionless transactions. So a lot of money has become digitized. That was one of the first things. A lot of information has been digitized, where rather than going to a library, almost every book that you could possibly want is already online.
Mhm.
What other things what other things, and this is a question for everyone in the chat too, what other things do you see being digitized? This is like the evolution of the internet and our lives.
Mhm.
Things are going digital. Software is taking over the world.
Sure. Yeah.
What
So,
you
I mean, to kind of further that thought, right? So, you were talking a lot about services being required, like previously humans to engage with you to make those services happen. And we've seen a huge shift that way, services being essentially like fully automated. And so, we mentioned things like banking and things like that. I think the next trend is physical things being digitized. And that's why the whole trend of tokenization is so hot because I think many services are already there, right? Like you don't have to go and rent a movie anymore at Blockbuster. You can just load up your TV and there it is. You can watch any movie from basically all of time. There's so many more movies being created every single day now and launched on these platforms. Songs as well. You don't have to buy records anymore, CDs. You don't have to buy anything like that. And so that's sort of the trend of physical reality now being digitized and tokenized as well. And so what's left, really? I mean, what's left that isn't digitized yet? These are things like houses, access to those, cars, any sort of like larger physical purchases like that. I think those are coming up next.
that's a great point. Okay. Let's dive into what that future looks like. Paint a picture. You said houses.
Mhm.
Imagine in 10 years from now,
Yep.
this technology is more mature.
Yep.
people have we have now digitized the housing market. What does it look like versus what it is now?
Sure. So what it is now, I mean, it's very difficult to get a house sold. You know, you have to generally contact a real estate agent. They come to your house, they stage it, they photograph it, they upload those photos to a website. They write out a long description of all the benefits. They hold an open house, and then people come into your house, they look around, they think, I don't know, maybe I'd like this, maybe I won't. Maybe they put in a bid, they overbid, they underbid. Then you have to go through those bids. You have to decide if you like any of them, if you get enough bids, right? Because you're working on a local area right there, and then maybe you can say, okay, yes, I approve that one. And then the real estate agent takes a large chunk of the sale price, and I'm sure there's other things as well with the sale where people are going to be stepping in as middlemen to take chunks of that. So that's how it works right now. It's a very long and convoluted process. But now imagine in the future, okay, I want to sell my house. I go around, I take my photos after staging the house myself. I post it online, and let's say I upload it to the future exchange where houses are being bought and sold, and someone comes along, they say, "Oh, that's a really nice house. I'd like to buy a chunk of that house. I don't even need to buy the whole part of the house if I don't want to. I want to invest in that house. I like that neighborhood. I think that this house is going to increase in value over time, and so I'd like to invest." And they buy 10% of the house. Wow, that's interesting. Or let's say they do want to buy 100% of the house. They can right then and there. It happens in literally under a minute. They own the house now. I move out, and they have the rights to that house. Easy.
and and that's a very interesting point you make, that it can happen in under 1 minute. Because today, what when you sell a house, it
It's
it
a
takes
month.
lawyers, it takes a month, it takes multiple real estate agents. We're basically doing the same process that we did like 100 years ago. It's one of the only industries that hasn't grown all that much yet. I think we're at the point now where people are doing e-signatures. This is how far we've gotten. We've got e-signatures now, guys. We're
Yeah.
signing stuff on online, but still the transfer of funds, the all the different parties involved that are getting paid, um, it's still slow and it's laborious and it takes specialized people. But what Justin just painted here in Web3 is like, hey, that person can buy a piece of your home in a minute, or they could buy the whole thing in a minute, or 1,000 people around the world could buy a
Sure.
0.1% to buy your entire house. Perhaps they could buy, or for example, you're like, hey, I want to buy a home, but I do not have the $300,000 necessary to put a down payment on this, or 200,000, whatever the number is, because real estate prices are so high now. You can come in with a group of people who are willing to be silent investors, for example, that you meet online, that you don't have to trust, that have no ownership or keys to the house like that. Like they're not going to come into the house, but you're like, okay, I'm going to put down a part of it. These are the people who are going to be part owners with me. And the ownership aspect, the appreciation of the property, the value of it will be automatic, where you can easily go in and buy a home in minutes that you find online, like you buy, I don't know, you buy something on Amazon. Like buying properties will be as easy as buying something on Amazon. The same way, like Amazon made everything that was shopping where you had to go out to the different stores and you had to find all the things that you like and you had
Mhm.
to buy them. You've got real estate on a website that's like Amazon, and that you can click a button and you can transfer the money instantly and own a part of this home, or be able to like literally live in it with the assistance of other silent investors that you don't even have to know who they are or where they're from. They've just provided the money and they know that you're living in the house. Like all of this is possible, this reality. And for example, they can sell the house at any time without affecting me. Like they can sell their portion, their 1%, their
Yep.
$1,000, because the house is tradable like a stock, like an Apple stock.
And that was a fascinating concept you mentioned as well. Like, let's say you get a bunch of silent investors who want to speculate on the value of the house. They don't necessarily want to live there. And, maybe they take a certain, I don't know, rent chunk out of your paycheck or whatever per year. And then you can actually get to live in that house. You don't need the full amount of the house's cost. I mean, that's a fantastic concept right there. And another thing as well to like drive the point home. Let's say I wanted to buy a house in like Indonesia or something. I could easily do that on Web3. I can't do that very easily right now. So it would be a far more global market.
Exactly. Exactly. And so this is something that OSIS is a big, big part of. Um, actually, I'll let you really drive the point home and give people context on the OSIS side of things, what OSIS is
Sure.
doing in space.
Yeah, I mean, OSIS is incredible. Like we are building this full ecosystem, full stack ecosystem, where someone can come along and tokenize anything, whether that's an asset or themselves, in under a minute. And in the future, they'll be able to launch that asset on the exchange and upload any needed files, any sort of files related to that onto Vault. And it's going to be lightning fast and privacy first. And then they can verify their identity as well. So it's this whole ecosystem where you can ensure that you're acting with other people who are verified people. They're not like bots or scammers or something like that. And it's going to be a system that's safe and enable you to participate in essentially like the next large stock market. Like we're basically reinventing the stock market plus Google. I mean, that's what it is. There
I'll
it is,
pull
this
I'll
graphic.
pull this up for you. Yeah.
And yeah, we're one of the first movers as well in the space. I think that's really important to note too. Like Jalal and Chris have been working on this thought for like 10 years and like have been working on this physical manifestation of it for over 2 years. So we're one of the first people, organizations doing this. And I think being the first mover is a huge advantage. I mean, look at Bitcoin, right? Like other things could have technically come along and did come along after Bitcoin, but nothing ever surpassed it because it had the first mover advantage. Is there anything you want to add, Jalal?
I think yeah, let's spotlight myself. So for those listening in and learning about all of these things, the fact is that these concepts that we're talking about, this next evolution of the internet, let's zoom in here. It's already here. The opportunity is already here to be positioned and to be involved in everything that we're talking about here when we talk about real estate coming into this Web3 world, when we talk about other technologies digitizing and coming into the Web3 world. What we are doing as a project at OSIS is making this available not only from an educational perspective, right? You're going to learn a lot more about this for the rest of this course, but in a product and tool perspective. We want to equip all of you, starting with the information. This is what the whole course is for, but also with the tools necessary in order for you and your people and your family and your community to make the most of this massive wave that is tokenization, that is Web3, that is the evolution of the internet, the digitization of the entire world. The largest transfer of wealth and creation of wealth and opportunity that we have ever seen ever since the Industrial Revolution, like over before any of our even grandparents existed. The largest thing since that, even larger than that, is happening right now over the next 10 to 20 years. And this is exactly what we're building on in order to give everyday people, everyone listening to this, the ability to participate, to build, and to get ahead of the trend and to get ahead of this tsunami.
So that's fantastic and beautiful. I think specifically focusing on the fact that OSIS is a DSO is really nice as well. Like the fact that we really care about individuals first and foremost, and we want their success first and foremost to empower them. I mean, that's what this whole trend is about. It's about empowerment of the individual, and having that as a core piece of our identity, I think, is absolutely key.
Chris actually made a really good point here for those watching and listening. The main process for a person who uses OSIS's technology to get in this space, to tokenize, to digitize, to build, is to first, step one, tokenize. You've tokenized an asset. You've taken this asset and you've brought it from the real world, the physical world, or the internet, or your intellectual property, or your brand, or whatever it is that you want to bring into this new realm of Web3. You tokenize. We have an application for that. It's called OSIS Tokenizer. It takes less than 60 seconds for you to do that, and it's really, really simple to use. The next step is to promote, to bring this asset or currency into the OSIS social exchange. It's a social platform that has people who are voting and funding what you're doing. So not only do you get the ability to build, you also get the ability to like be seen and be supported by a large community of people. This whole new world, people who are like-minded. And the third step is to launch, is to release it and to allow other people to be a part of it, get voted into the OSIS exchange, the marketplace, and get supported by the community and get supported by liquidity that's in the space. By liquidity, I mean the money. Liquidity is money. We're going to put it as simple as that. Don't need to make it any more complicated. So that's great. I'm glad that you added that, Chris.
Yeah, ultimately, to summarize this, we've talked about many technologies going from Web 2 to Web 3. To me, I think of OSIS as like the Web 3 version of the whole stock market. And actually, I just looked this up. The total market cap of the US stock market is $50 trillion. Crazy. So, OSIS is building the Web 3 stock market for the world, not even just the US stock market.
Tokenization. So what we're building is projected to be significantly more than $500 trillion. That is more than 10 times the entire US stock market in
Yeah.
terms of value being created. Because if you look at just the housing market alone, global housing market size. So that is definitely not it. Okay, okay, there it is. $637 trillion, 2024. The real estate market worldwide is worth this amount, and this is locally. This is a local number, okay? It's worth this amount in its little bubble where people can't really get into it and get involved from around the world.
Mhm.
Like right now, we have no interest or understanding of what the heck is going on in like Moscow's real estate market. You can't really get involved, even if you were a real estate investor. But once the entire market is tokenized, all of that is online, all of that is in a marketplace, and all of that is easily accessible, meaning
Yes.
that there's more liquidity.
Like
So,
imagine getting to live that lifestyle of that person who's jet setting around to all of their homes in the world. You could do that with far less money as a result, you know? Like let's say you sign a smart contract with someone else that says, I will buy 10% of the value of this house and I get to use it 10% of the time. And then you can schedule it that way. And it's like, boom, I've got houses all around the world. I'm going to Moscow for the summer. I'm going to Indonesia for the winter, you know? Like it's incredible. It really enables a quality of life for the average person far higher than what they currently have access to.
and that is exactly how tokenization, the digitization of just one market, every single market is going to be digitized, tokenized. It's the same word. OSIS is a part of the entire process, building the infrastructure, building the base fundamental tools for people to get involved in that. That is how it's going to be way more than $500 trillion in the next decade.
Wow, I need to catch my breath for a second. That's incredible. Like, just like trying to digest that is just mind blowing, you know?
It's huge, and it's just the organic natural growth, the same way as we breathe and the sun comes up, and what are they, monkeys evolved into me, monkeys evolved into humans. The internet will evolve and digitize, and we're going to see more software, and we're going to see more ease of use in transacting in the business world and the economy. And Web3, blockchain, tokenization, everything we've talked about in the last 3 episodes is the foundation for that. That is the future, and that is like the reality we're going to experience. OSIS is right here in the middle, or at the beginning, really. We're not in the middle yet. We're very, very early, and it's the perfect time for everyone to be here. It's
Wow.
it's a, it's a blessing to be here at this time.
So essentially, OSIS encapsulates the entire possibility of Web3 in itself. Like, OSIS essentially is like all of Web3. Like, wow.
Well, here, let's jump over. This is something that we didn't actually go over on our first on earlier calls, but I feel like it's a good opportunity now. Let's zoom this out. This is a little tricky. This is the OSIS white paper. We're going to go more into white papers further on in the course. A deep dive into like what to look for, how to create one, if you want to build your own project. But essentially, a white paper outlines what you stand for, what is your business plan, who you are, and this is what OSIS is building. So we're gonna go into it. It's a little bit deep, but we're gonna break it down for you. The concept, okay, the concept of a decentralized sovereign organization, what just talked about earlier, DSO, which is OSIS, would be powered by the masses by definition. A universal value system of all public brands, businesses, and interconnected services would be a decentralized standard globally. Okay, so what does that mean? The concept of what we are creating, OSIS, being decentralized, being not owned by one individual, but controlled and owned, powered by the masses, right? Powered by the masses. Our entire community of over 100,000 people today would create a universal value system. This is Web3. This is the blockchain. This is that marketplace that we were talking about of all public brands, businesses, and interconnected services, right? Real estate. Perhaps you have a service business. You can bring it on the blockchain. You can bring it into this world, into Web3. All of these things would be a decentralized standard globally within what we are creating, a decentralized sovereign organization. And this is an international thing. This is not a company, it is a movement. All parties interested in participating or creating their own projects would now be able to do so easily through tokenization and with no need of a middleman controlling the process. That includes us. We don't control any of the process. OSIS is giving you the tools to use for free use. Like it is yours to use. We are not controlling you. We're not telling you what to do or what not to do. It is true freedom in building what you want with the technology that we've built and that we've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, and more than a decade of thinking to create and make accessible to anybody in the world. The socioeconomic benefits, typically exclusive to large private firms in the upper class, the 1%, would now be garnered by the world's citizens, the entire world citizens, no matter where you are, where you're from, what your caste is, what your creed is, it doesn't matter. OSIS makes this possible for less than a fraction of the cost and time. OSIS embodies the strength in numbers ideology. This is how we come into this future where we have equal opportunity for everybody, no matter if you're from Africa or if you're America or you're in even on a random island in the Pacific Ocean. If you have internet, you have access to Web3, you have access to what OSIS is giving you. And together, we can make a massive, massive difference in the world where, yes, everyday people and everyone can actually benefit from this massive shift, this $500 trillion shift. We missed it in the past. We've missed it a million times. We all missed Bitcoin. We all missed Apple. We all missed the internet itself. Like the 1999 thing where everyone thought, oh, the internet's over. It's going to crash. It's going to disappear. We all missed out on that. But we enjoy it and use it every day in our lives. This is the opportunity. This is the next phase of the internet. And here we are.
Well said. Well said.
Cool. So does that, Justin, do you have anything else you want to cover in this episode?
I mean, I think that's a fantastic point to just kind of leave off. Let people kind of resonate with that message there, that OSIS is essentially like actualizing the final vision of Web3. Really, in itself, OSIS is just doing that. And I think that's a great point for people to kind of just hold in their mind as a final thought.
Cool. Okay. So in future episodes, we're going to dive much deeper into everything we just talked about. You're going to get to know how to use OSIS's tech too. We'll use it as the example technology. There's all kinds of platforms, but we're going to focus in on what we can do today within OSIS's ecosystem so that you are equipped to build in this space, to also like move with an informed perspective, and you can move securely in the OSIS world and the greater world at large. For now, that's it on my side. Oh, we're gonna add one more point. We got a point from Chris right here. I'm gonna check Instagram as well, just in case Aaron or somebody else. Oh, Lucas asked a really interesting question. We're gonna get right back to you, Lucas. So Chris said, our daily mission is to introduce at least one person to the space, whether they come into OSIS or not, regardless of race, background, class, or whatever social standard one has. We knew the risks of opening things up to the whole world and letting people know to do their own research, being participating or buying in. People who are moved and joined for profit potential will always leave for that. But we also know that in the long run, the foundation will follow Bitcoins as a result. And we all know what happened there. One question here from Lucas. What if investors own 51% of the house, of your house, and therefore have the right to the key?
Well, it would depend on the contract that you set up with the rights that come along with buying a certain amount of that house's value. So if you set it up that way, the contract is that the majority of investors can tell you to get out, then that's what you would have to do. And if you don't set up the contract that way and that they're just purely speculators, they have no rights over who gets to live in the house, then you could stay, obviously. So it'd still ultimately be under your control, your freedom, however you set up the contract with the investors.
Correct. Correct. So Lucas, the answer to your question is, yep, you got it. It's how you it's how you set up your deal in the first place. If you are living in it and it's fine and you're just paying rent, hey, well, it's the same as renting from a landlord. Except now you own equity in the home that you live into. Lucas asked, where do I learn how to set up contracts in terms of smart contracts? Well, we are building a course for that right now, real time in OSIS to show you how to do it. We do have a platform up right now called, you can actually go to the URL launchpad.osisplatform.com or just click the link in the bio from OSIS here. And you'll find on the homepage, you'll find OSIS Launchpad. You can go into there and you can kind of play around with the stuff. If you really want to know how to exactly build that kind of thing, stay tuned. We're going to do a dedicated episode for that kind of thing and show you exactly how to build in the space, whether it's for real estate or another industry. there's so many different ways to build a smart contract that we can't cover every little thing. But if there's like a lot of demand for something specific, we'll definitely build like a course about that specifically. Chris said, really excited and proud of the OSIS community making it to the public stage in this journey. We've come a really long way. We have many more challenges ahead, but I have the utmost faith in our team and our community that is forever growing. Oh, the website for the book is done, by the way. We have a book that's dedicated to this, like basically a prequel to the whole course. It's called Blockchain for Idiots, how blockheads are making millions and changing lives. But very soon, everyone's going to be able to get it. So Lucas, if you want to know more like fundamental information, check out the book. The website's going to be up like within the next 24 hours. Click the link in our bio and you're going to be able to get access to that book. It's going to have information on this as well, like the question that you asked, and more background information on how you can get started too.
Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. So yeah, I mean, I just want everybody kind of resonate with what we chatted about today, the future of Web3 and how the entire world is essentially moving in that direction and how OSIS is going to be capturing a large piece of that pie there. I think that's a great point to kind of just sit with and think about.
Wonderful. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are up for this hour. Remember, this episode today is going to be actually filmed in studio. We're building a full detailed course. It'll be completely professionally produced, and it'll be released for sale this summer. In the meantime, go to the OSIS website for more information. Check out the white paper, and you can go on the exchanges and buy OSIS if you want to as well. All of these things are available to you now. Cool. Okay, take care.
Fantastic. Have a